Um, Thank you for coming to my talk. As Sophia just said, I'm going to talk a little bit about body weight today. Humans come in all shapes and sizes, and the question that my lab group sets out to try and answer is why? And the reason for this is if that you're too far at either end of the spectrum, you're at massively increased risk of a range of different diseases. So we focus on what makes people overweight, so that's that end of the spectrum. But a lot of the questions we're going to ask through the presentation you can apply to anywhere on the spectrum, and you'll get similar answers but slightly different. So that's why we focus on one point. So why are people different weights? The answer at first glance is really easy. As the physicists in the audience will tell you, energy can't be created or destroyed. And therefore, if the energy that you're taking in, so this is food and drink, is balanced with the energy that you're using, so this is to heat your body, to run your immune system, to run your brain, to do any exercise. If those two values are equal, you will stay the same weight. But if over a prolonged period of time you have more intake compared to output, then this energy has to go somewhere and it gets stored as fat. But really, I don't think this answers the question. This says how there is variation in body weight, but it doesn't tell you why. So what is it that's different between different people? And you can think of a lot of different things. So in terms of the environment, people have access to different amounts of food, to different quality of food. They have different activity levels. So this is both in leisure time and at work. What your mother eats while she's pregnant with you has a huge impact on what your body shape is as an adult. What your friends eat impacts what you eat. And the sort of pollutants that you're exposed to, including things like antibiotics, has an effect on your body. And whilst it's absolutely indisputable that environment has a huge impact, in the West, we all have broadly the same environment. It differs a bit between people, but everyone in this room is able to go out and buy. They don't have to walk very far, and you can buy far more calories than you need to sustain your body in a day. So this suggests that there is something fundamentally biologically different between people. And really the nicest study that has ever been done that showed this was done on twins. So I don't know if any of you are twins, but if you're a twin, you can get paid loads of money to do biomedical research. So I would do that. So what the researchers did is they actually went to Sweden and they found loads and loads of twins who were adults now, but when they were born, they were separated from their twin and they were raised apart by adoptive parents. And they studied these adult twins, and they found that if you look at the twins, the individual twin and the parents that raised it, there is absolutely zero relationship between the weight of that twin with the weight of its adoptive parents. But if you look at the relationship between the twin and the other twin that it never met, the relationship is 0.75 out of a maximum of 1. So that's really high, and I don't know about you, but I find that pretty amazing. So what they've done is they've done lots of different studies, things like that, looking at various different other family relationships, and together what they conclude is that 70% of the variation in body weight between different people is explained by genetics. So this is a little bit less heritable than height, but it's still very strong. And if you think about this, this is completely logical. Back during human evolution, if you did not have enough fat stored on your body to survive through periods of famine, you wouldn't have survived to pass on your genes. So of course there will be genes that regulate body weight. So I'm going to step back quickly because I know a lot of people gave up biology age 16. So all humans have about 20,000 genes, and these are made from something called DNA. And DNA is in every one of your cells in your body. You get half of your genes from your mum and half from your dad. And each gene can have small variations in it, and that's what drives the variety between all of us. The only people that have identical DNA are identical twins. So going back to body weight, so they knew it was influenced by genetics, but the foundation of how we currently think about genetics and body weight was a complete chance discovery. It was an accident. So in 1949, in the Jackson laboratories in America, a mouse was born. And this mouse looked normal when it was born, but it just ate, and it wouldn't stop eating. And by 3 months old, it weighed 3 times as much of any of its brothers or sisters. So science takes quite a long time. It used to take even longer. So it took them 44 years to find out what the gene that was wrong in this mouse was. And they've named it leptin. So any classicists in the room will know that leptos means thin in, I think it's Greek. So it's just a change to one letter in this gene, and it renders the gene completely non-functional. And so then the next question to ask was, is this just a problem in mice? Could this affect humans too? And this work was actually done by one of the fellows here at Pembroke. But in 1997, they identified 2 humans, actually, with the same mutation. So this is a 3-year-old boy who weighs 42 kilograms, which is 6.5 stone. And it had the same behavior, him and his sister, they had the same behavior as the mouse. They ate and ate to the extent that families tended to lock their kitchens. And really this raises the question, what does leptin normally do in the body? And it turns out leptin is made by your fat cells. And the more fat cells you have, or the more fat is in them, the more you secrete. And it travels around your body signaling how much fat there is. And so these children and the mouse can't produce leptin, so their body thinks they have no fat. It thinks they are starving to death, which is why they eat and eat and eat. So the good news is that if you can inject them with leptin, this is the same child a few years later, their body restores to something that's more average for their age. And quite quickly after this, they worked out the pathway downstream of leptin. And the way they did this was that they looked for other children and mice with the same eating behavior. And it turns out if you break anywhere in, you don't really need to read the details, but if you break anywhere in the pathway, what you get is a severely obese child. And so this provided a huge insight into how your body regulates food intake. But going back to the original question of what causes body weight variation, is this relevant? So the most commonly found mutation is in this gene here, but this only affects 5% of severely obese children. So it's really not relevant for most people. And the child will be severely obese. So what it doesn't explain is why is one person a kilogram heavier than another? And to answer that question, they had to wait several years for invention of a technique called GWAS. And GWAS is used to look for common variation. So you take thousands and thousands of people, and you look at their DNA at specific points, and you can look at the variation in the sequence and compare it to people's weight. And the result looks like this. It's called a Manhattan plot because it looks like a skyline. And where you have peaks coming out, like here, that is where in your DNA there is variation that is associated with changes in body weight. So as an example, the FTO up there, which is the highest one, if you have the risk version of this, you will probably be 1.5 kilograms heavier than someone who has the protective version. And because there's lots of different areas of the genome, you can add them all together. It's a cumulative effect. So we can ask a lot of different questions with these. So one, which I think is quite important, is you have the same DNA in all of your cells, but it's not all used everywhere. So the DNA which is used in your hand is different from your eye, and that is how your hand knows to be a hand, and your eye knows how to be an eye. So if we look at these areas of the genome, where are they expressed? And it turns out they are almost exclusively in the brain. So we can imagine a lot of things that they might be doing in the brain. maybe they make you feel a bit hungrier. Maybe they change the kind of food you like. Maybe they make you really love going jogging. The problem is we don't know. We don't know what they do. It's too expensive to sequence all the DNA at the moment. We can't do that. So we sequence little bits and we say that bit represents the variation of everything around it. So we know more than 100 regions, and all of these 100 regions have several genes in them. So we're looking at several hundred possible genes that we need to study. And science is expensive. We don't have enough money or people to study all of them, because we'd like to know what they're doing. So the problem, what do these genes do? So we need a model to study genes. So because we want those results to be relevant to human, obviously humans are a good model. They model humans very well. But I really hope I don't need to explain the obvious ethical implications for experimenting on humans. So someone else in my lab group uses dogs. And dogs are a great model, but we don't really breed dogs in the lab. So what you're relying on is finding a dog with mutation in your gene of interest, just luckily. So a lot of research is done on mice, and they've provided completely invaluable research, but they're very expensive, and they take ages to breed. So this is finally where we get to my PhD. So I am saying, can we use fruit flies to model these weight genetics? And the primary reason for using fruit flies is that they are very cheap to maintain and that they breed very quickly. So just across the road in the genetics department, I have thousands of flies, whereas anyone who works on mice will maybe have 5 mice. Flies have also been used a lot in the past for genetic studies, and that means that there are much more techniques available for manipulating their DNA than there are in other things, in other organisms. So just as an example, it's really easy to make legs grow out of their head. But are they relevant to humans? So it turns out that they have 75% of the same genes as us. So we can take most of the genes of interest and find them in a fly. So I mentioned the gene leptin earlier, which was in the mouse and the human. And I'm not sure, it's quite small, you might not be able to see it, but if you take the same gene in a fly and mutate it, the fly gets really fat. Flies also have conserved metabolic pathways because, like all animals, they need to eat, they need to store energy, they need to use the energy when there's no food. So just as a summary of what I'm doing in my PhD, is I'm taking all of those genome regions that were identified by the GWAS studies. I'm looking at the genes in those regions, finding the fly equivalents, finding mutants of these genes in the flies, and then looking at their body weight and their feeding behavior, and to try and narrow down which genes are the best to study, so that then we can do the more expensive studies in mice and eventually humans. So I think take-home message from this talk, genetics is really powerful, both in terms of the effect it has on you, but also as a tool for investigating you. So thank you for listening, and do you have any questions?